Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me right here, Bright on TV, every other Friday, 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, uncensored. Now, as we look today at what is allowed to be spoken of, what the information is the fact checker service began just last week. So anything that you might have an alternative opinion to, whether it be the increase in volcanism, the frequency of hurricanes, and that's what it's all about. We'll cover a little bit in the California hurricane, which was made by global warming, not really because they had the same events happen in 1939 and also in the 1970s. But it all leads to one thing. What will the truth be? Even if you have facts that say something completely opposite of what a fact checker said is incorrect, then where does it lie? Because the truth is being erased from us website by website. And welcome back. Thank you for joining me for this crucial message of what we will be allowed to talk about and why the control net is coming down right now instead of could have been last year. Even during COVID, it wasn't as strict as it will be beginning now moving forward. But the reason would be the intensification and the amplification of all these changes can be explained through natural media in repeating cycles that are going to affect our civilization. Now, they don't want people explaining it better than the mainstream media can and coming against and showing opposite facts against a narrative. See, facts never stand against narratives because narratives crumble every time. That's why they will never want to have you with a factual debate in a narrative push, because the illusion will be turned to mist. So where do we go from here? You know, we're entering this grand solar minimum. It was a cycle anyway, but the intensity of it is something that is an unknown, as well as we move into the amplification of the planetary alignments in 2024 with a second magnetic field and the subsequent possible huge amount of meteor debris coming into the planet in April of 2025 from that magnetic tugging of said magnetic anomaly. The news needs to be carefully controlled from this point forward. It's going to be one direction only, and anybody out here who has alternative opinions why things are occurring is being erased by Google one site at a time, one fact checker at a time. So let's start off with today's slides. I got some goodies for you. This is Mount Etna. And as we come into this grand solar minimum amplification, changes electromagnetically in our sun, we're going to start to see more volcanism on our planet, just more volcanoes going off. So I also pulled this one off of here. You can see, approximately how large it is. It's not such the earth-ending event, but, if you're over in Italy near Mount Etna, for you, yeah, you're going to be eating gritty volcanic ash in the food. They've done a lot of studies through history where they actually look at dental records of persons they find they dig up from, say, the last 8,000 years. And there's an actual real study of this, of how much grit is in the teeth, whether it be sand or volcanic ash, and they could tell in localized areas how much volcanism there was in a timeline based on the amount of scarring and pitting on the teeth from extra debris in the food, whether it be vegetables or whatnot. So this is your image of the day over Italy with the volcanic ash rising. Now, if this was Hunga Tonga, that ash would be nearly scraping the International Space Station. That's the orders of magnitude different in the eruption. So all eyes are on California. Jerome Powell and the Fed raised rates for the 11th time in July. The Hill warned it's a mistake that could spark a recession. Economists believe this is the last rate hike in the most aggressive rate hike cycle in history. Rate hikes are typically headwinds for gold. Meanwhile, gold has gone up over 20% since 2022. Imagine where gold and silver are going to go when the Fed stops raising and starts cutting. Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Patriot Gold Group has the No Fee for Life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver on qualifying rollovers. Give them a call, 888-546-7020. And now on with the video. And please be discerning when choosing information to view on this. Now, I cannot believe the amount of media outlets pointing directly to point, climate change is responsible for this one hurricane. It's so, baffling how you can point to one single climatic event. It's just a weather event, it's hurricane. And they can point and say it's because of climate change. So this is if you go to the National Hurricane Center, and this will be the newest that I pulled up just before the show here. And interestingly enough, this hurricane is named Hillary, and it's about to slam into Southern California, destroy a huge amount of homes, buildings, and agriculture. And at the same time, drench into Death Valley. We're going to have lakes at the end of this in Death Valley until, of course, it evaporates off or drains off. So here's your trajectory and the pattern here. That'll take us through the weekend because this thing is supposed to hit Sunday night, Monday morning-ish. The similarities to the Maui fire, etc. There's a huge amount of homes and home lots across LA that have never been trimmed. So there's a huge amount of untrimmed trees. So if there is something falling down, like they always talk about electrical wires sparking fires, there could actually be a raging inferno inside some of the suburbs in LA because there's so much tree cover that hasn't been cut down or maintained by the city. And I was with Ransom Godwin last night, and he pulled up all these Google images showing exactly where these square lots were just evenly distributed across the city. And if you widened it out, it was very discernible. There was one on a kind of a grid pattern, completely tree forested in these lots in between homes in the city. First tropical storm, 84 years. Oh, it's got to be climate change. So let's take a look at it. Ryan Maui putting it out. It's going to come up to Category 5 before it dissipates down as it reaches a little bit cooler water once it approaches LA there. We're still unsure if it'll be, what kind of category. Will it be a 3? It's going to continue to step down as it marches into California. So please know that these eye-popping headlines are Category 5. Well, it is right now. It's near Mexico. So as this eye wall continues to enhance and then collapse on itself, it's going to roll to Category 5 status. That's what they're going to run with, and they're going to blame CO2. I've already seen at least a dozen headlines this morning claiming the same thing. Now here's your trajectory path. So almost all of the models put it somewhere going into Southern California and up into Nevada. So you might think, well, this is really rare. Is it rare? How rare is it? And I thought the same thing. I want to see how much, first of all, how much rainfall is coming down. Will this destroy agriculture? Will there be some denting into the crops as we come into harvest season? Because please remind yourselves and remember this. The fires that were started in Canada just a few days back have a smoke pattern that's now getting sucked in the back of this low that's going to be coming over some of the areas that are going to begin harvest about now in Canada. Because remember, the further north you go, the faster you're going to need to harvest. So, they're generally done in October with their harvest. We're down here, we're just getting into the harvest, and it's sort of mid-harvest by that point. That's why we have all these, hayride festivals and things. Up in Canada, that's long done by the time we get into our pumpkin rides down here. So think about it. If you could create the forest fires and you knew the way the circulation on the window was going to go, you could push all that smoke in there and create a huge amount of rainfall in the crop growing areas right when they're getting ready to harvest. Then the machines would be too heavy and you couldn't get in and harvest. So that's, one way to look at it and a way to take away food supply. And that is currently ongoing. So as these systems develop over the next 7 to 10 days across the grain growing areas in Canada, watch how this rainfall will then slow the harvest or completely nullify them. It's a very short window to get in there to harvest in Canada to get a lot of stranded crops every year. So I'm looking at the rainfall here, and this is a whiteout that goes all the way down into Mexico and up through, Southern California. So anywhere you see that brown, you're looking at 6 inches. Then when it goes above there, you're getting 8, 9 inches, something like this. And so you can wide in and zoom in here. So you're looking at about 12 to 14 inches here in that dark purple right in the center, 8 to 10 inches in that sort of bluish, surrounded by the brown. So you'll have to wonder how much, real rainfall will come out and how much agricultural damage this will do. See, this is where you got to split the hair. The agricultural damage directly from the rainfall and the wind, okay, that's subset A. But what about making the fields too wet for things to go in and harvest at this turnaround? I mean, it'll take out one section of harvest because California continuously grows and continuously harvests. Now, what if you were to reduce one whole harvest rotation out of Southern California? That's our lettuce basket, food basket, mainly for the United States. Grains are in the central area, but when you're talking about fruits, nuts, lettuces, green leafy veg, strawberries, this kind of stuff, that's all Southern California. So you have to wonder if you're going to pull 3 months of agricultural production out and take it offline just for that little bit of time, what would that do to our food prices and availability, which we already see shrinking minute by minute, day by day? So Ryan Maui puts it out here, looking for 4 to 8 inches of rain and record floods in Death Valley. So, that whole heat thing a minute ago, you won't watch them touch it with a 10-foot pole when the cool comes in and the puddles start forming. This is one thing that they're really good at, is obfuscating after a record cool event, after they've beat the horse to death and then covered the funeral with a heat event. You'll never hear a single syllable about cool events. This is the way it rolls in the modern world. So those of you that can then have some information to refute and then actually say something, oh, this is a global warming event, this is caused by CO2, and you just simply pull out these two charts here. Hurricane Kathleen, 1976, did the same exact thing. The track is in yellow, went right up almost exactly the same trajectory as it is that we're about to see over the weekend here. How much did they get? 17.6 inches of rain in California. That's a lot. And then along through Mexico and Baja, they got 6.5 inches. So are there any other historical incidents? Yes, there are. Here we go. 1939, they didn't even have a name for this one. And it went straight up, right up into Long Beach, past San Diego. And at that point, there was an enormous amount of damage to crops and structures. I understand waterworks projects have improved, but with that much water coming down, it's really difficult. It's going to take a fair few days to flush it, and the damage that will occur in that flushing process. So this is where it gets strange. If I was to use these two charts after that fact checker or that organization said this event is due to global warming, like if it's a CNN or a BBC, they're allowed to then push into Google and put a fact check notice on sites like mine that would say, hey, they're pushing disinformation by saying it's not a climate change related event, even if I have past incidents well before the CO2 thing was even talked about, or possible 1939. In this world, that is considered misinformation now because the experts told you something different. And I'm coming against the experts and saying, hey, your facts don't match up. But because they have a full staff to continue to flag every post, the new fact checker tools are being used against fact itself, which I'll get into in a second here. We keep hearing about this whole, hurricanes are increasing in intensity, and the number of hurricanes is just off the charts. It continues to increase decade after decade, year after year, because of so much CO2 influence. Well, the trend since the 1930s shows otherwise. And as we can see, number of U.S. landfall major hurricanes. This is category 3 and above. Doesn't count Cat 1 or Cat 2. And the numbers are pretty clean, by the decade. You can count that. Hurricanes really aren't that high in counting, like 10, 12 per year. It's easy to put that statistic together. But showing this one also, since it goes against BBC saying that it's the most hurricanes and increasing, then a BBC fact checker could flag that and say, no, we're the experts here at BBC. You're pushing disinformation. So the reason I'm trying to point this out is this week, this whole fact check toolbox went live. And then here it is. Google announces worldwide ban on independent media from search results. Check, check, true. Because what they're trying to do is have all the world's largest multimedia companies then fact check people like myself and say, oh, it's not true. And where does it really dive in? So I started to use the Fact Check Explorer. I encouraged you to do it yourself. Now, shockingly and surprisingly to me, there's so few articles that are actually in the Fact Checker Explorer. So when I put keywords in, like hurricanes are becoming more frequent because of climate change. True. Well, yeah, I just showed you the chart. Not true since the 1930s, but they say slightly declined since 1900. It's only half true. Okay, this is the kind of Now, since it's been fact-checked and rated, anything that ever stacks or releases a news article from independent media ever again will be pinged against this and labeled as such. And if it comes up as false, it will be delisted from Google searches. This is scary. This is the straight up, incredible taking it to the Uber of past regimes we've seen through history from, Stalin, Lenin, Pol Pot, Nazi era, whatever you want to go to. Russia, China. China's at the Uber right now, but this is taking it another step to jump us right into Chinese censorship style of breadth of it. So here's your chart. Now that goes against what a fact checker said. So a fact checker with a higher and a larger corporation behind it can now deem this information incorrect and deem their information correct, which is who was the arbiter of truth? Now this is, really bizarrely scary. And here's another one. Let's talk about burned acreage. So if we look at the left chart here, this takes us back to 1925, when there were far more millions of acres burned every single burn season. But if we come over to the right chart, and we just start from 1985 and overlay the CO2 concentrations, that's the profile you get. So which one is the truth? They both are, but the left chart would be labeled misinformation. The right chart would be labeled true. So this is where it's going, and the removal of websites and findability of anything related to this will be just gone. Also, we hear runaway record temperatures got to be the hottest Arctic ever. But if we go up here and take a look at the actual temperatures as recorded by the DMI and the National Snow Ice Data Service, NSIDC, both Arctic temperatures, you see that blue line on the left there? That's the averages from what, 1958 to 2002. That yellow is this year. They would have you believe the Arctic is just a completely sloshy mess with no ice up there. And look, the average, it's at or below the averages most of the season. But that would go against. Now, literally, a BBC fact checker come in and say, hold on. We were told we're saying it's the warmest year ever in the Arctic. Can you show this thing? That's misinformation now if a fact checker gets a hold of it before you can. So solar activity drives climate change. I went back to the fact checker again. Obviously, false. And I said, solar activity drives climate change. Okay, false on both, really? Great, let's dig into it. New release comes out from NASA saying Neptune's shifting cloud coverage is linked to solar cycle and solar activity. Okay, that planet can have links to solar activity changing cloud patterns, but Earth can't. See how convenient that is? Earth can't do it. No, it's going to jump right over the Earth and go way out to Neptune. And that the cloud cycle is affected there, but don't think about it at home here. How dare you? Just like ice ages, we're talking about longer term shifts here. So we're looking at 11-year cycles. Obviously, the regular 11-year, or it's actually 11.2, solar maximum, solar minimum cycle. Now that is a smaller cycle encapsulated in larger cycles of this grand solar minimum that occur approximately every 400 years. So we get these larger, more heavy, powerful cycles inside of smaller cycles culminating into larger cycles. And that 400-year cycle in itself will culminate into a once in a 2,000-year cycle. And that's woven in. So you can start to see the levels of cycles. So I want to take a look at Neptune here. This is coming from Hubble and directly from NASA newsfeed. So I want to take you back for just a minute. If we go back to May 21st of 2020, Pluto's atmosphere collapsed. If you didn't know that, it did. It was in this space kind of news headline, so it wouldn't have made your regular news feed. The atmosphere collapsed 20% in on itself. Whoosh. And then here, Neptune back in December 15th of 2020, the top part of the northern hemisphere ripped apart and reversed itself. That's why the storm started spinning in the opposite direction. The atmosphere of that same planet, they just said it was responsive, clouds overlaying on the solar cycle, its atmosphere reversed the flow in 2020. You know, that didn't make much headline either. And Jupiter's auroras at the solar minimum were 10 times higher than the averages that had been seen before. But that was at solar minimum. Now we're at solar maximum. That's not happening. But when we come back to solar minimum, you're going to watch this thing flare. It's going to get big. And then also, again, space headlines, July of 2021, the minerals in Mars started to glow with aurora because it doesn't have a magnetic field to give north and south pole with the auroras. So the magnetic interactions just come in anywhere there's minerals like metals in the crust and just start interacting, and then they'll glow from there. So these are the hot spots that showed glowing from the crust of Mars because the solar activity and the connections were so intense that that electromagnetic connection back to the sun was strong enough to make that glow in plasma and solar fields coming down, which is insane that this didn't make headlines either. So to put it in perspective here, I'm going to take you back to probably like second grade. Mercury, Venus, Earth, we're number 3. Then we get Mars, then Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus. It's way out there. So really, how far out is it? 1 AU, 93 million miles. That's Earth distance to the sun. One of those is 93 million miles. Neptune is 30 times further away from the sun, and its clouds are affected by solar activity. Yet, false on the fact check that solar activity can drive climate on the planet. This is really, I'm kidding you not, this is like a Mad Hatter insane asylum 1880s kind of world that we're living in. The Mad Hatter rules the roost with its digital keyboard. Yikes, look out. So this fact-checking thing is getting a little out of control here because Google must remove manifestly inaccurate data. This chart right here, which is the Greenland Ice Survey Project number 2, gold standard for global temperatures until it disproved global warming. Now they don't talk about it anymore. Showing this chart is now considered misinformation. Although it's been 12 years or so, this was the gold standard quoted by all in the climate debate as the #1 source to come to for climate reconstruction and temperature reconstruction on the planet. Now, because all the talking news heads say global warming, CO2 driven, nothing to do with solar activity, this chart right here now is considered misinformation based on the fact checkers. Although this was done by those involved in the Greenland Ice Survey Project, all esteemed climate scientists. See, now we're getting into, they're going to have to erase the past information to continue to just try to force the narrative down your throat. Literally, facts don't mean anything any longer. And I'll read you the bottom here. It says, Alphabet, Google must remove data from online search results if users can prove it is inaccurate. Again, we got to split the hair. What is inaccurate? Is the IPCC's information saying it's only CO2 driven the source? And now, because they're the source, anything else is considered inaccurate. This is the world we've just entered here. So charts like these, well, they show drastic cooling and drastic societal change and civilization collapse through history. We'll take a look at that when we come back from the break. The world we're entering, you're going to have to not even trust any news, so you're going to be on your own and responsible for your own news collection from this point forward. See you after the break.